2015, he was named the top in-house technology lawyer in the country by Legal 500, and was the inaugural recipient of the Reporters Legal Innovation Awards. Prior to GitHub, Julio was corporate counsel for Yelp and also for Facebook. All right, so there's a lot more to say, of course, but I don't want to use up more time. I think, please, yeah, it's great to have you here, Julio. Thank you again. Please join me in welcoming Julio.
Thank you, Roland. And I was telling Roland a minute ago that I broke one of my core rules of public speaking being here, which is never be between lawyers and free alcohol. So I'll keep it short. I'd like to thank once again Roland for inviting me, the Center for Legal Informatics, and the organizers of the FutureLaw conference, which I think is really one of the best places. I mean, every time that you get into one of these rooms and invariably you run into someone, you hear a line that can inspire you, motivate you, questions that you weren't even aware that you had suddenly occasionally get answered. So thank you very much for having me back. I last spoke at FutureLaw in 2014, and frustratingly much and little has changed since then. Walter Benjamin, one of my heroes when I was an undergraduate, a German philosopher, intellectual, wrote that behind every fascism, there's a failed revolution. And if we perceive over the last several years a growth of nativist impulses over the world, the jolt of reactionary reflexes, the creeping but unavoidable whispers of anger, confusion, discontent, and importantly, I think, civic disorientation that exists in the world, and that all of these are, yes, conditions that historically have led to various forms of fascisms and different types of authoritarian regimes. If we perceive these things in the world right now, I think that it's appropriate, perhaps, to take Benjamin at his word and to look around for the failed revolution that we've left behind. And if we do discover such a body, the corpse of this failed revolution somewhere, to engage in a basic level of forensics, to understand not just what the revolution was that failed, but why and how and whether or not it's worth or possible to resuscitate it. Given today's forum and the title of today's talk, let me begin, perhaps not at the beginning, or by attempting to limn the still darkened corpse of this failed revolution, but at the end, by revealing to you that many of the heroes and heroines of this murder revolutionary mystery will be and will need to be many of the people in this room. Lawyers, legal practitioners, legal academics, legal technologists, and entrepreneurs. It is precisely within those nodes where power and tradition seem most obvious, most impenetrable, that there is often the greatest revolutionary potential. The fruit hangs lowest and most plentiful on the tree that is perceived and believed to be poisonous. In my legal, business, and entrepreneurial capacities, I have too often been presented with answers before questions. Pitches to disrupt areas, industries that I didn't know about, let alone that needed to be territorialized and disrupted in the first place. Products and pitches that sound cool and that maybe could potentially make someone a lot of money, but that solve unarticulated problems or else unprioritized ones. I'm here to argue that if there's a way out of the wilderness that too much of our and other societies around the world are struggling with, and that many of you are working on trying to solve, that the path will not be found without a fundamental and critical reckoning with lawyers, lawyering, and with past, present, and the future of the legal provision of profession within what we still today call capitalism. We seem to assume, for instance, that lawyering and profit-maximizing business models are consistent with one. I have my doubts. And even if they were too many law firm executives and industry participants ignore this uncomfortable and occasionally ubiquitous in the periphery question. I'd like to lay out 5 observations, theorems, assumptions regarding my view of the current legal landscape within which we find ourselves. First, I believe we lack sufficient understanding and dialogue about the very nature of contemporary law and legal practice in the West to properly prescribe solutions, technological or otherwise. The last couple of panels throughout the day, anytime you're talking with lawyers, you quickly run into issues of definition, issues of concepts, of categories, and talking past one another. We continue to build for Atticus Finch and Perry Mason, but these men are not just dead. They're non-existent. Part of the great value, again, in this conference is to help further our understanding and, again, just communicate about some of these issues that face contemporary legal practice. Number 2 is, and this is not going to be a surprise, I think, to participants in the industry, is that there is something and continues to be something incredibly perverse about nations funneling some of their brightest, most analytical, and often most idealistic individuals into the meat grinder of legal practice. Their talents are generally being put to poor use. Many of us recognize this, and few discuss it in any effective terms, and fewer still are doing anything to remedy that issue. Third, as our Mr. eloquently noted in her talk this morning, there is tremendous liberating and community building power in technology, particularly as it relates to law. I personally do not subscribe to the belief that technology is in some way the panacea to the issues that we face within society or within the legal community. Many of the issues that we face today, I think, are rooted in deep intellectual, ethical, moral, spiritual crises that reach beyond even the proverbially long arm of the law. However, I do believe in strongly that somewhere at the Venn diagram intersection of the work that lawyers don't like doing, that clients don't like paying for, that seem on their face to be stupid, and what robots and scripts could handle in a more efficient mode, that at that intersection there lies not just an opportunity to be more efficient and to cut costs, but to increase access to justice, as we heard in the last conversation, and paradoxically, that there is at that intersection a key that might let lawyers behave more like the lawyers that they envisioned when they first went to law school, or that they saw in popular culture, or wherever else it happened to be. And that these lawyers may help us to resuscitate perhaps not just one failed revolution, but many. Third, I argue that due to many decades, longer perhaps, of corrupt, inept, overwhelmed, or simply failed attempts at democratic parliamentary decision-making, see our current state of Congress, the Brexit fiasco, any number of daily ignominies and embarrassments that we have to deal with, that there has been a legislative vacuum, and that this legislative vacuum has been filled by, predictably, any guesses who's filled that vacuum? Lawyers. But not lawyers elected into the traditional public sector, but increasingly unelected and anonymous ones in the private sector. We are rightfully quick to point fingers at the business executives who are viewed as the ultimate decision makers within their organizations. But let me tell you, as someone who has operated for many years as a corporate litigator and outside counsel, first early Facebook and many other tech companies, as general counsel at GitHub, and then later as its chief business operator and member of its board of directors, that business decisions in areas of novelty or ambiguity are often only as good as the legal advice that business decision makers are providing. Armed with computers shooting out privacy policy in terms of service-shaped bullets, in-house lawyers, particularly within tech, have staged a coup of the traditional modes of democratically elected legislative representation, and worse, most often have done so unwittingly. These lawyers, and I include myself, unveiling of our mystery revolution. I'll come back to this point shortly. Number 4, law, and this one, it's always interesting to see where people respond to this point. Law is a product of human effort and human ideology, and is therefore itself inherently ideological. And because law is ideological, its expression and its practice are ideological as well, and therefore appropriate subjects of philosophical and ideological critique. As we know, one of the greatest predictors of how individuals voted in the 2016 election here in the US was the presence or absence of a college degree. And for too many on the left, this point seemed rather obvious. A validation not only of their educational superiority, but their intellectual superiority as well. This is a trap. And that type of snobbery is the type of snobbery that encourages one of the great tragedies of the current age, which is an inability really to communicate with people that have different views from our own. Rather than taking a college degree or a legal degree as a proxy for intelligence, perhaps we might rather view it more directly and simply as a person's ability to pay for, enroll in, attend an educational institution, and to enroll in classes where they were taught not just facts, but new ways of looking at the world, its structures, and its history. As someone who flirted early on in my career with the idea of becoming an academic, who easily could have devoted years to the study of a single page, a single line, let alone a book or a group of works by Freud or Lacan, or you fill in the blank, I personally have a tremendous amount of sympathy for those we attack for having, for instance, unconscious bias, without first explaining or defending what we mean by an unconscious, what we mean by ideology, by what means ideology informs our own thinking and our unconscious non-thinking. We sell the work and the effort of prior generations of activists and intellectuals short when we assume that their efforts are now somehow so obvious and so intuitive that they do not need to be discussed or that people do not need to be educated on them. Our answers or prescriptions might well be correct, they might be wrong, but we'll never know and we'll certainly never convince others if we refuse to show our work. If we're going to piggyback in our argumentation on centuries of incremental intellectual evolution with respect to how we think about the nature of self, power, biology, gender, economics, nationalism, or the like, then I also think that we have a basic responsibility to understand and to describe whose shoulders we believe that we are sitting on. Number 5, brings me to the next observation, which is, somewhat perhaps controversially, the future is female. My daughter was walking by as I was preparing some of this and was wearing a future is female shirt. The future is female. And in some ways, this last point accumulates the previous ones. To say that the future is female is to say that the past was male. Or, if we're particularly adventurous, to say that we've been living under a certain brand of patriarchy, and that the legal system has been existing under a certain brand of patriarchy. What does this have to do with law? What does this have to do with legal tech? And what does this have to do with their futures? We have to show our work. We're lawyers. We think logically. And we have to follow our logic even into places that are uncomfortable or that we do not know. These days, too many choose only to walk paths that lead to destinations that are already familiar to them. I didn't go to law school due to any burning desire to be an attorney. I did not feel calling to be a lawyer. I went for two main reasons. I went first because I like to read, I like to write, I like to argue, I like discourse, and I like money. And I thought that this was perhaps an opportunity to make a living. The second one was that I had a broad and vague sense of immigrant guilt or responsibility. My parents came to this country from Guatemala in the mid-1970s. My mother came on a student visa. My father came with, let's say, slightly less legal documentation than that.
They came to this country for opportunity, but as they often reminded my brother and I, they came so that their children would have an opportunity to become doctors and, yes, even lawyers. I made a deal with myself. I knew I wanted to be back in New York. I'd been in Florida for too long. I would apply to whatever the best law school was in New York City, and if I got in, I was going to go. And if I didn't get in, I was going to go take the GRE, reassess, and probably spend the rest of my life getting well acquainted with my copy of the MLA handbook. I got in, and I went. I struggled from day one. I didn't recognize myself in the student body. I certainly didn't recognize myself in most of our reading. I personally am not descended from white, Anglo-Saxon, or Northern European merchant classes. I'm not better for this, I'm not worse for this fact, but it is a fact. When I speak particularly to minority lawyer groups, to law students of color, to female attorney organizations, often one of the first questions that I ask them to consider is how the current and future practice of law would be different if they were in charge. If the relative historical ratios of white men to them were inverted, would the laws be the same? Would the challenges that we've been talking about in the practice of law, would that be the same? How would it be different? If most lawyers were women, how would litigation be different? How would deals work? Would we be motivated by the same things? I think the answer is that things would be quite different. And it's not my position that all of those different ways of being, behaving, and billing would necessarily be better than the status quo. But it is my position that any discrepancy between our present and that alternate future is a place to poke at and to excavate. A locus of opportunity to better understand our current condition and at a minimum an opportunity to begin to acclimate ourselves to the idea that the systems that we have inherited are just that they're not immutable, a priori truths that cannot be changed, but that they are inherited choices that were made by someone. These are perhaps controversial points, but will be necessary if we're to make headway on finding answers. I'll close this particular topic with an exhortation that to multidisciplinary collaboration. And that I think that we have to do a better job as legal practitioners, as members of this industry, in what we view as within the canon or within our industry. The problems we confront are simply too complex and too broad to think that solutions can be cobbled independently and piecemeal. At the start of my career, I was very much an attorney who happened to represent Facebook. Then I was an attorney who happened to represent Yelp. But it wasn't until I got to GitHub in 2012 that I forced myself, or more accurately, where the company culture forced or cajoled me to begin to think of myself as a GitHub employee who happened to be an attorney, rather than an attorney who happened to work at GitHub. Is this possible? It is. I assure you that all manner of things, technological needs, challenges, opportunities included, begin to reveal themselves as soon as lawyers feel comfortable admitting that they too are humans and employees. Things that we dismiss as irrelevant to legal practice suddenly seem germane and even necessary. Emotional intelligence, social intelligence, that research paper you wrote in your college anthropology class on consensus building, team building, ritual and taboo, suddenly these might all be relevant to how attractive you are as a legal applicant or a colleague. I don't know exactly what failed revolution the current reactionary moment has grown out of. And given the chaotic state of affairs around the world, it's likely more than just one. The 90s promised an internet revolution, utopia, a shrinking of the world, a folding of the poles on the spectrum that would lessen inequality. We got a revolution, but not the one we promised and not the one we expected. And too often when we go searching for utopia online, what we're met with is clickbait, fake news, and ads. And perhaps the fascism of the age is not, in fact, a political one at all, at least not the sort that the last century engendered. If the characteristic traits of any fascism are top-down authoritarianism, dictatorial power, suppression and censoring of opposition, and strong regimentation of the target society or communities, have I not just described something like the current state of affairs between most internet companies and their users? Of course, these companies are not fascist, since to use the term flirts with being irresponsible. But my main point is to draw attention to the insufficiency of our language, particularly as it relates to the internet and the law that governs it. From 2007 to 2009, I represented Facebook in a case against the company that was called Power Ventures Incorporated, long since defunct, which had created one of the early, truly ambitious data aggregation websites, Power.com. Power's business proposition was compelling. Give us your login credentials for Facebook, give us your login credentials for MySpace, Orchid, whatever the site happened to be, and then you visit Power.com. You don't have to visit all these other websites. They would become the homepage for the internet. How to convince a judge that this behavior was not just unacceptable, but unlawful? Borrowing heavily from the Northern District of California's 2000 opinion in eBay versus Bidder's Edge, which is a case that's worth reading for those of you that are interested in understanding some of the history of the internet and how some of these things came to be, I argued that this was no different than a bank. A user owned their data, of course, but they had chosen to deposit that data with Facebook in the same that someone might store their family jewels in a safety deposit box in a bank. The ownership of the jewels wasn't in question, notwithstanding the fact that the bank always retained the right to limit access to that safety deposit box. Hours, business hours, security credentials that you would have to display in order to get to your safety deposit box, etc. We won the case. And suddenly, the metaphor that cyberspace was real or personal property and could be controlled by the same means as real or personal property or chattels suddenly had legs. And it has come to define our thinking and ideology around the internet and online life. Of course, my online property is nothing like my real world personal property. The contracting power between me and my bank is nothing like the power that I have when I contract with online service providers. And no more than the mode of legal practice that we have inherited is the sole and only way to go about things. It's difficult to overstate the influence that lawyers have had and have over the world today. In a world in which traditional legislative bodies lack the ability, knowledge, or expertise to properly regulate the internet, we are left with an undemocratic, quasi-legislative network of unelected in-house lawyers codifying their and their employers' business models into contract and thus into law. And we see the results around us. A better tomorrow will not arise through the work of politicians or even nation states. It will come by way of many of the things that we've heard discussed here today. New models of discourse, open collaboration, sharing of information, analysis, education, and practice that is itself led and born out of new archetypes of attorneys, legal technology, and legal education. I do not consider myself a millennial, but as someone who was born in the 80s, I do think of myself as someone who speaks the language. We cannot hope to revolutionize the present. By definition, what is revolutionized is the future. Our aim should be forward and targeted at how the next generation of lawyers and legal professionals will think and act and be motivated. We should operate with empathy, which is something that we've heard a lot today. There are these threads that we need to operate more collaboratively, that we need to think more empathetically, and that we need to bring something that might even resemble or be called love into the way that we interact and deal with conflict, regardless of what forms it takes. I'm excited by many of the things that I've heard here today. It's thankless work that people do in this room. To the point that was made, I think Jonathan made the point that often these are passion projects, and that's true with legal work on GitHub as much as it is more traditional code-based projects. They tend to be 90% labors of love that are brought to market, and that we need to channel and not lose sight of that as we move forward. thank you all for your inspiration, for your contributions. I look forward to working and using many of the technologies and services and products that you are creating. And I do believe that we will be able to create a better future, but that it will require multi-generational, multi-sector work. Thank you.